Here's Juilliard professor Edward Barnes teaching about Sunday at a recent Broadway Maven class.
And my understanding from David is this is Sondheim Academy, so that you guys kind of know some stuff. This is a little more advanced, so I'm going to get a little technical today rather than just general kind of stuff. One of the things that really is interesting to me about Sunday in the Park with George is we all know it's a show about the creative passion of making art. But what's particular about it to me that makes it intriguing is that the art that's being made is visual art, and it's not something you can hear, unlike a song. So, for instance, Merrily We Roll Along, the creative work that's being done in the show by the characters is creating songs. And that seems like, well, that's a natural thing for a composer lyricist to tackle. But something like creating visual art is much more difficult because we can't actually hear people paint. And when you look at a painting, there is no sound coming out of that. So there's nothing for a musician technically to draw on except the visual image, which makes no sound whatsoever. So this is a bit of a challenge for somebody like Stephen Sondheim. How do you bring this passion of painting alive in music? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, is some aspects of that that Sondheim both employs, and then one that's sort of theoretical, and that you can take and look at the entire piece of Sunday in the Park and see if that's something like you can apply it to all the places. And I'm going to be talking about musically the places that are specific to George painting. So it's that music. I'm not going to be talking about Dot's world or anything like that. This is George's world, and he is a painter. So we're going to look at the music that applies to that. So I'm going to just share a slideshow with you here. It's got some audio in it. Hang on one second. Let me open it up. And you should be seeing a slide that has 3 terms on it that I'm going to talk about today. Some of you may already know what some of these are, but I'm going to really take it into some detail. So we're going to talk about music pointillism, music impressionism, and color to sound synesthesia. These 3 things, 2 are technical, and the third is a theoretical approach to something. So we're going to look at it that way. Just so we're all on the same page, and I think, again, you all probably do know all these first things, just so we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the painter George Seurat, who was a post-impressionist painter. And the techniques specifically that he developed are chromoluminarism and pointillism. So those 2 things, we need to know what they are, because that's what Sondheim builds on. This is a picture of the Sunday painting, and on the right side you'll see an extreme close-up of the lady with the hat that's circled in there. And in that you can see what I'm talking about with Seurat's technique. The first thing is chromoluminarism, and that also is called in art divisionism. So you're dividing colors, you're separating the colors into individual dots. And then the overall effect is that they interact with our eye optically to see one sort of thing. So for instance, in this particular one, the painter would not be actually mixing colors of paint and then applying that mix onto the painting in the same way. For instance, if the artist is now trying to paint this lady's face in the shadow of her hat, he is not creating a color that is the color of her flesh tone. He is creating different colors which are put side by side. So what he's doing is taking each of those individual colors and applying them directly to the canvas with a paintbrush as a point. So the execution of this kind of thing is called pointillism. So taking that color and making a point of that color on the painting. And they were very particular, Seurat in particular, about the use of a color wheel, which helps in terms of aligning adjacent colors. So for instance, if you wanted to create the illusion of orange, you might use orange red next to orange yellow, and then the in-between illusion becomes orange itself. If you want, in this case, the color that is created in the shadow of this lady's hat on her flesh tone, he adds blue for the shadow, and in our eye, it mixes optically to make a sort of flesh tone in shadow color. Now, Sondheim, what we're trying to figure out is what can he do that will give the audience a sense of this kind of artistic technique, doing this in music. The first thing you have to know is there is a whole genre of music, a movement of music that's called pointillism. It was common in the mid-20th century, in the 40s and the 50s, and it was developed in France by Olivier Messiaen and Pierre Boulez. They believed that each note could be considered a point of music, and each note had properties. The speed of the note, the volume of the note, all that sort of thing. So each one had properties, and that you could position them separately on the page and create pointed music. So for instance, the little piece down there that you're looking at sounds a little something like this. That's pointillism. That's from a Messiaen piece, and all that is note by note. A lot of people think of it like stars. The way stars twinkle and they have different luminosity, different notes have this same kind of thing. Now, I explain all this to tell you that this is not what Stephen Sondheim is doing. He, in fact, creates his own version of pointillism in music, and it's much, much, much more literal. It's a theatrical approach to the music. He really wants the audience to connect sound with the application of dots onto the painted canvas. So if the artist is painting individual dots of color, Sondheim is looking at this as if each note is kind of like a dot of color, and he's applying the notes in the same way that the artist is applying the colors. This is his kind of pointillism. You first kind of get to see this in a song called Color and Light, where George is working on a particular painting, and he really spells it out in here. And he literally takes each note, and it's as George is applying them on the canvas, the notes are spelled out at the same time. It's all marked sempre staccato. That means always staccato, separated and marked. As pointillism is, each color is separated. So the notes of this are never played slurred or in phrase. That's not how it is. It must be separated because each dot must be separated in sound. So he marks it that way. And then you kind of have to think of this in the same way Seurat would have thought of this as chromoluminarism, where each dot is a different color. Now I chose these colors. I'm not saying these notes are these colors, but for instance, those could be those three colors down below. And what Sondheim is particular about is the distance between each note is the same way the distance between colors react. So in other words, if you were on a color wheel, the difference between a tan color and a blue color is pretty far. So that interval is also pretty far. But if you look at the distance between dark blue and light blue, that's not very far on the color wheel. So Sondheim uses things like much shorter intervals, and this is how he's sort of lining up his notes. Then if you take this whole thing as a phrase, what he is doing is the same thing as Seurat is doing, where you create the optical effect with your eye. In other words, this now is like all the colors being seen at once. So you create the equivalent of visually what I have around the word chromoluminarism. Now, This, once he creates it in this particular song, also becomes a musical motif within the show, and he's going to use that sort of to represent the idea of painting musically. Again, he's trying to storytell with the music the act of painting. He does this both as an accompaniment figure, that means it's instrumentally in the orchestra or on the piano, and it's also later in the scene sung. So you have dot, dot, sitting, dot, dot, waiting, dot, dot, getting fat, 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 more yellow, dot, dot, waiting to go. So it's all pointed with words, syllable by syllable, the exact same way. Now, this is Sondheim. So once he establishes that, he begins to grow this idea of pointillism, and he moves beyond single note pointillism into something that's called cluster points. And these would be the equivalent of taking a snatch of the painting rather than one dot of the painting. So it's like the camera pulls back a bit and you see a little bit more at a time. So he takes the same points of paint but builds them in what are called clusters. We'll explain in a minute. So it sounds like this. So a cluster is when you take very close intervals together and smash them together into one. So this first chord is actually 4 notes. That's the cluster point. All at once, hit. This is also a cluster point. The next one, it's just spread out. These are cluster points, but he's still painting, but keep in mind the camera has moved back and he's now painting points in clusters in points. This now is laid in underneath the voice while George is painting these clusters. We're pulling back the camera a little bit. But if you look at the score here, you'll see something under cluster points right there. And that music, which is being played on top of it, sounds like this. Much more blurry, a much more different sense of that. This is Sondheim doing musical impressionism, which is now laid down below. And technically, this is when a wash of sound is created by using extended harmonies. And I'll explain that in a second, but let's listen to a little snatch of the song that uses all 3 of the things I've talked about so far, and then I'll take into impressionism. Have a listen. This is Color and Light.
Order. Design. Composition. Tone. Form. Symmetry. Balance. More red.
He's painting.
And a little more red. Blue, 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 even, good. Bum, 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 bum. More red, more blue, more beer. More light.
Here.
Color and light. There's only color and light. Yellow and white. Just blue and yellow and white. Look at the airness. See what I mean. No, look over there, miss. That's done with green.
And again.
Conjoined with orange.
So what you hear in this is it starts with single notes as points, then clusters of points, And now we've got something called musical impressionism going on underneath. David and I were talking about this a little way as we came into the class. The name musical impression is borrowed from the French art movement, which is called art impressionism. There's a picture of Monet's water lilies there, and I think we all know stylistically these kind of what it looks like and the blurred edges to everything. And they merely named the music after this. The people who were creating the music did not call their music impressionistic, but we use this to describe it now, and it does have particular qualities. The two biggest proponents of it were French, Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. And the aspects that make it what we call musical impressionism are two things. One is that there is a suspended wash of sound with very blurred textures, and these are created by using what are called extended harmonies. So we'll take as an example a little piece, a little phrase here by Debussy. This is... That's one little phrase, 3 bars of Debussy. And what you get is this wash of sound. And that wash of sound is created by using what are called extended harmonies. If you take the basic harmony of this song, it's in E major. E major means it's based on an E major triad, which is made up of 3 notes apart. So 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you extend that, you keep adding 3s on top of it. So we're up to here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So now we have 1, 2, extended harmonies. So he takes the extended harmonies and threads them out in lines and blurs them all together. That is the core of what musical impressionism is. Now, this is Steve's version of that. Same kind of thing, and I think what you can hear is that wash of sound, and in his case, he is creating his wash from this extended harmony. 1, 2, 3. That's the extended harmony. So it's the core 3 plus notes extended up and beyond that. So that's what he's doing there. Now, once he does this, Steve, being Steve, makes use of everything. So this also is used as a musical motif throughout the piece. It's frequently associated with some sort of completion or satisfaction with what the painter has done. A really beautiful use of it is in the tune Finishing the Hat, where instead of being in minor, he takes it in the major. And here what you have is the motif with its wash of sound, and this one is also based on extended harmonies. So he's in G flat major, and he adds all these notes to it. And you get, so you have this beautiful extended harmony that he's woven through there. Another beautiful use of music impressionism is the finale of the first act, the tune Sunday. In this, he creates his wash of sound out of the opening chords of the very top of the musical. So you have that chord, those notes become, and the second chord at the top of the show becomes the second chord in Sunday. And he uses those to create his wash of sound. And if you look at the very bottom of this, even if you don't read music, you'll see these arced lines drawn, and that means everything is connected. Do not release the sound. Let it all blur together. And these all played as one big blur, and that's his wash of sound. What's really cool about this is he spells out his extended harmonies in the melody. Oh, sorry. His extended harmony is G major, 1, 2, 3, and then he adds, and every one of these notes is the melodies. All of them are there. Now, what's super cool about that is that in itself is brilliant, let's face it. But what's more brilliant is that these notes are the exact same notes that he has previously used in his cluster points in color and light. So that's the same extended harmonies and the same notes he's using in the tune of Sunday. He's pulling everything together, and yes, it's the exact same notes in Finishing the Hat. It's the very same thing. All of it is pulled together into one, as it should be at the close of a thing. And it's all done in impressionistic style, which is this wash of sound using these extended harmonies. So let's listen now to two little bits, Finishing the Hat and Sunday in the Park, and then I'll tell you, or Sunday, and I'll tell you a little more.
Let her look for me to tell me why she left me, as I always knew she would. I had thought she understood. They have never understood, and no reason that they should. But if anybody could...
Wash of sound. Those are the extended notes.
Finishing the hat. How you have to finish the hat. How you watch the rest of the world from a window while you finish the hat, mapping out a sky, what you feel like planning a sky, what you feel when voices that come through the window go until they distance and die.
Opening chord 1, 2, all blurred together. Here are the extended harmonies. I never know how to stop that song. It feels like doing something wrong to cut it in the middle, but I had to stop it. That's the point. So the last thing I want to talk about real quickly is something called color to sound synesthesia, which is also called chromesthesia. I did talk about this to Steve Sondheim, and it came up completely accidentally We were talking about one of Maurice Ravel's piano pieces, which is the top of the Tombeau de Couperin, which sounds like this. Okay, so we were talking about that, and I said to him, I think that's a green-yellow piece. And he said, oh, do you have chromesthesia? I said, no, I don't listen note by note. I don't identify colors with individual notes, but I do associate keys with colors. And he said, that's funny because I have some of that too. I think like that. And so we were talking, for instance, if the sun is shining and it's yellow, it would have to be in D major for me. I could not think of it in any other way. And he said he had the same kind of feeling. So let me explain a little bit what this is. It's perceiving color through music. And what he and I were talking about is as key centers. Some people have this note by note. If you play an E, they see a color. I don't have that. It's all about keys. So what's odd is that people who do have this have almost very little disagreement about what colors they actually see when they associate with keys. So for instance, if you look at E, the note E, I think of that as a light mint green. If I play F, I think of that as a deeper red. And that's the way I think when I hear keys, and I think of it that way, and he has some of this same thing. So what's interesting to look at is if you look at color and light, where we started, theoretically, sort of he's painting, and Dot is there, and we sort of assume he's painting her. And in the show, she ends up being this lady here next to the man. If you look at the colors in her, Steve sets it with these three keys. And those colors, the way I hear them, are purple, red, and blue. And if you look in there, you can certainly see some of those colors in there. In finishing the hat, it's set in G flat major. And if you look in the hat, there are deep blues in there. And the last one is Sunday, which is set in G major, which has to be yellow-green. I only can hear it that way. And if you look at this painting, it is topped and bottomed with yellow-green. Now, I never said to him, was Sunday green in your mind? We just talked about that through the Ravel pieces. So this, to me, is a little bit theoretical on my behalf. I don't know that if he's ever said anything. Gail might know if there's anything in print about this, but it is absolutely kind of cool when you look at the painting and then you see where he sets these, what the key centers are. The colors that they are associated with are in the painting. So it's really kind of remarkable. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I think I've used up my time anyway.
No, it's fine. Edward, I think you ended up someplace kind of mystical. Right? I mean, there's something kind of magical about your attitude towards these colors and the sounds and then you identify them in the painting. I thought that was really neat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Shalom, I'm David Benkof, the Broadway Maven. The Broadway Maven is a vibrant educational community. Every month, members may attend 5 to 15 classes and other expert-led Broadway experiences, all for just $18. There's a membership link in the description. And here's a video I think you'll like.